There's an old saying that crocodiles are living dinosaurs, but it's not quite true. While both groups of reptiles share a common ancestor, they split off into their own distinct branches during the Triassic and are separated by millions of years of evolution. However, nature has a habit of recycling traits if it means being able to survive in similar environments. And such a phenomenon caused quite a few croc-like dinosaurs to evolve and thrive in the wettest places of the Cretaceous. With one genus being so croc-like, its name quite literally means crocodile mimic. Bearing a long, slender snout, it's no wonder this animal was named Suchomimus. Suchomimus was a genus of spinosaur from the early Cretaceous period, having once roamed Niger 120 million years ago, when it was a much wetter place. A massive flesh-eater with a long, narrow snout and huge claws. It used these tools to hunt its favorite prey, fish. It's this unique appearance that made Suchomimus especially important. In defining an entire group of fish-eating dinosaurs we've only just begun to understand in the last couple of decades. During the 1990s, a team of paleontologists led by Paul Sereno ventured into the desert of central Niger to a remote, arid land called Gadafawa, where shade was little, but the fossil beds were rich with bones. After weeks of excavation, the team of paleontologists found a creature unlike few ever seen. One so croc-like in appearance that Sereno's team couldn't believe it was a dinosaur when they dug it up.
The whole thing's about this big. It's nice.
When I first saw it, I figured, no way, that this can't be a spinosaur, because like we don't know of a good spinosaur skull ever in the world. And so I was like walking around trying to find ways to say, well, it's not a spinosaur, it's just like a funky piece of crocodile.
And after a year's worth of work and examination in the lab, it was not only confirmed to be a dinosaur, but revealed to be something far more significant. Something much more bizarre and terrifying. So much so that it was given the fitting name of Suchomimus tenerensis, the crocodile mimic of Tenere. To say Suchomimus looked like a crocodile would be an understatement, thanks to its long, almost comically narrow jaws. These jaws were nearly a meter long, filled with conical, slightly recurved teeth lining its slender maw. It's a characteristic that tells us a lot about the lifestyle this animal lived, most especially what it would have eaten. Having jaws and teeth shaped like those of a crocodilian, Suchomimus is thought to have a diet primarily composed of fish, with its long, narrow jaws able to dip and probe into the water, before seizing sizable, slippery prey, with the peculiar notch at the tip of the snout, lined with rosettes of teeth, evolved to reduce the stress of struggling prey, similar to modern crocodiles. Like crocodiles, Suchomimus couldn't chew, relying on its recurved teeth to maneuver the prey down to the back of the jaws towards the throat, almost like a conveyor belt, where prey would be swallowed whole, if they were small enough. And if Suchomimus did have eyes too big for its stomach, metaphorically speaking of course, it had another trick, or rather another tool quite literally up its sleeves. A pair of massive, muscular arms, with each of its hands tipped with 3 hooked talons. With their coracoid bones, or the bones connecting the shoulders to the sternum, being hook-shaped, strengthening the arms by allowing for a powerful contraction of pectoral muscles, providing the needed power to wrestle with the most tenacious prey. With these living meat hooks, Suchomimus could grasp and hold onto large fish and other animals, sinking their hooked claws into their prey's flesh as they pulled them apart bit by bit, similar to a brown bear. It's even been suggested that Suchomimus and its closest kin utilized a hunting strategy similar to those of bears, waiting along the riverbank, patiently watching the water, before plunging head and arms first to ensnare their prey. Of course, wrangling prey is the easy bit. Finding prey and tracking them are another story, especially in murky waters of rivers and swamps. But Suchomimus had a neat little trick, something that bears don't, built right into the snout. Close examination of Suchomimus and its relative snouts revealed several pits running along the jaws, before forming a cluster at the tip of the snout. It's another trait they share with modern crocodilians, one that may have provided an answer as to how Suchomimus hunted. These pits house mechanoreceptors, a sort of sixth sense that acts as pressure sensors, and are especially sensitive to motion, as well as touch, allowing them to sense the movement of prey in the water without the need for a direct line of sight. And with these receptors, Suchomimus could detect the faintest of movements beneath the surface, allowing them to hunt in the murkiest of waters, or the darkest of nights. Along with these super senses, Suchomimus also possessed a secondary palate on the roof of the skull for feeding, affording the dinosaur additional strength, allowing Suchomimus to resist the twisting and wriggling of struggling prey. And with a bite force in league with those of alligators, combined with conical teeth evolved to pierce scales, Suchomimus wasn't letting go until its food went down its gullet. That being said, while Suchomimus may have a crocodilian-looking skull, it was a dinosaur through and through. And when putting Suchomimus next to any modern croc, the differences become all too clear. It may look odd, but Suchomimus does have the telltale signs of a dinosaur. Large holes in the snout called fenestrae perforated the skull, making it much lighter while helping with temperature regulation, a trait completely absent in crocs, whose skulls are fused and robust. In addition, the eyes of Suchomimus are placed much closer to the side, facing forward down the concave snout. Crocs, on the other hand, have eyes that sit atop the skull, in order to peer over the water when resting on the surface. The differences become more striking when moving down the rest of the body, with Suchomimus standing on 2 legs instead of 4, with an erect gait and an S-shaped neck. And most distinguishing of all, a furcula, or wishbone, at the base of its neck. Its head may look like a croc, but once you take a step back, Suchomimus starts to look a lot more like a weird bird than a crocodile. Nonetheless, with adaptations like these, you'd think Suchomimus would be perfectly suited for a life in water. And you would be right. With the shape and structure of the jaws, combined with the orientation of the teeth, being indicative of an animal that spent much of its time feeding on aquatic prey. To top it off, a close relative of Suchomimus known as Baryonyx, whose remains preserve the same adaptations that can also be found in Suchomimus, along with the remains of partially digested fish preserved in their stomachs. Suchomimus and Baryonyx are very similar, to the point where it's even been considered that they might represent the same genus of dinosaur. But there are some key differences that set the two apart. For one thing, Suchomimus is at least 2 times bigger than Baryonyx. In fact, so large in fact that it's in the same league as some of the largest megatheropods in the fossil record, including Tyrannosaurus rex, at nearly 11 meters or 40 feet long. But by far their most important distinction are the tall neural spines crowning Suchomimus' back. These pronounced vertebral spines were much taller than those of Baryonyx, escalating to their tallest point at the hips in the base of the tail, creating a prominent ridge along the animal's back. When Suchomimus was first discovered, it was thought that these spines formed a large sail-like structure, almost like a more modest version of another one of its cousins, Spinosaurus. However, looks can be deceiving. While the vertebrae of Suchomimus were tall, they were far more robust in nature when compared to the taller, thinner dorsal spines of Spinosaurus. And while they were fundamentally taller than those of baryonyx, they were much closer in structure to those of Acrocanthosaurus, an unrelated carcharodontosaurid. And with these anatomical similarities come new implications regarding the function of these odd spines. The tall, robust vertebrae of Suchomimus evolved convergently with those of Acrocanthosaurus, or a case of two unrelated animals evolving a similar trait in order to respond to similar pressures. In this case, evolving more robust vertebrae to act as sturdy muscle attachments that formed a large muscular hump, creating a ridge down their backs. Modern bison and rhino possessed similar conditions in their skeletons, with the tall neural spines forming similar types of humps. However, their humps form around the shoulders, while Suchomimus' hump is tallest at the base of the tail. So what's going on? As mentioned before, Suchomimus' back would have supported a large muscular ridge, with the tallest point at the hips and base of the tail, with the specialized ligaments interwoven with the spines, increasing the performance of hip flexors, allowing the animal to walk, run, and move with increased speed and power. It could very well be that these unusual dorsal spines evolved in response to Suchomimus achieving gigantism, or multi-ton body size, with the tall vertebrae assisting in supporting the skeleton, a trait absent in baryonyx due to being a smaller, much more average-sized large theropod. That being said, it should be noted that there is some contention on if the baryonyx holotype represents a mature specimen. And if said material represent a juvenile animal, then it's possible that as they hit maturity, the neural spines would have grown taller. The similarities between baryonyx and Suchomimus are far from coincidence. Their long crocodile-like snouts and specialized neural spines are some of the defining characteristics of their shared family group, the Spinosaurids, with Suchomimus being one of the biggest, second only to Spinosaurus itself and possibly Exalia. Suchomimus in particular has been key in understanding these enigmatic piscivores, especially their diversity. When Suchomimus was described, paleontologists had very little skeletal material of Spinosaurs, let alone much material at all. Those that paleontologists did have primarily consisted of teeth and fragmentary fossils, including isolated skull material from Spinosaurus, the only material available during the 20th century after the destruction of the original skeleton during World War II. It wasn't until the discovery of baryonyx in 1986, Irritator in 1992, and finally Suchomimus in 1997 that scientists had acquired substantial material to analyze and examine, and were able to finally get a clear look at what these animals would have looked like. But amongst these shared similarities, what was even more remarkable were their differences. And with the description of Suchomimus in 1998, it became all too clear that there were two groups of Spinosaurs. The Spinosaurines, with their large sails and concave skulls, and the Baryonychines, with their long, narrow snouts, ridge backs, and proportionally longer legs, aka the group Suchomimus belongs to. Through the discovery of Suchomimus, much of our understanding of Spinosaurs has continued to evolve throughout the years, including Suchomimus itself. When it was initially discovered, it was reconstructed as a more traditionally proportioned theropod, with long legs and a shorter torso. That's gradually shifted into different, less conventional reconstructions over the years, transforming into a more barrel-bodied ridgeback Spinosaur, with slightly shorter legs and a longer tail. But amongst the most important aspects of them all, Suchomimus may hold the key to understanding the origins and dispersal of Spinosaurs across the world. Suchomimus is thought to represent a stepping stone in that distribution. Current evidence points towards Europe as the emergence point for the Spinosaurs, with the continent containing a rich diversity of some of the oldest known Spinosaurs of all types and tribes thriving during the earliest stages of the Cretaceous, who would then spread out through the southern hemisphere together, with the Baryonychines reaching what is now Africa by 120 million years ago, giving rise to Suchomimus. Here, Suchomimus would carve out its own unique niche as a large, semi-aquatic fish eater, scouring the rivers, swamps, and deltas of Cretaceous North Africa, living alongside other unique and bizarre dinosaurs, including another humpback dinosaur called Ouranosaurus. But unlike Suchomimus, this was an herbivore, totally unrelated to Spinosaurs. Instead, it was an early hadrosauroid, with a long, flat duck bill with a mouth containing batteries of teeth for chewing plants, and tall neural spines creating humps along their backs. Other unusual herbivores thrived here too, some even sharing the water with Suchomimus, like the rotund Lurdusaurus. Meanwhile, on land, long-necked dinosaurs called sauropods scoured the landscape. Amongst the most bizarre of these animals was the lawnmower-faced Nigersaurus, whose mouth contained over 1,000 teeth for grazing on low-level plants. On the other hand, Suchomimus also shared its environment with other medium to large carnivorous dinosaurs, like the dubious abelisaur Cryptops and the shark-toothed carnosaur Eocarcharia, with Suchomimus able to easily coexist with its fellow carnivores because they didn't compete for the same prey, resources, and territory, with Eocarcharia and Cryptops being land-based predators, while Suchomimus preferred habitats where it could fish in the water. But how much of its time spent near the water's edge has always been a big question, and within the past few years, Sucho's status as a water dweller has become more complicated than ever. Throughout the years, there's been a coming realization that despite descending from a family of semi-aquatic dinosaurs, Suchomimus was potentially the least adapted for that life, despite its numerous adaptations for eating, well, aquatic prey, with its body being comparatively less specialized to other known Spinosaurs. This hypothesis gained more support in a study published in 2023, comparing the bone densities of Baryonyx, Suchomimus, and Spinosaurus, in order to determine their abilities for swimming and potential ecological roles. The results of the study were surprising to say the least, revealing that while Baryonyx and Spinosaurus had bone densities similar to those of ducks and diving birds, Suchomimus was not as well suited for diving or even swimming, and spent more of its time in shallow water, potentially being more of a generalist than a water specialist. The authors even went so far to suggest that Suchomimus potentially lost its semi-aquatic adaptations secondarily, proposing that the Spinosaurus' semi-aquatic specialities were ancestral. However, these were met with some stark criticisms, and later studies haven't found this to be a consistent conclusion, including a later study from that same year examining the brain cases of the less derived Baryonychines, revealing that despite their outward fish-eating adaptations and affinities for water, their brains didn't show any specializations for aquatic life. In fact, their shape and structure were actually pretty typical of land-based large theropods. Another Spinosaur ecology study was published in 2024, tackling things from a different angle. Instead of relying on the density of their bones, the paper relied more heavily on the structure of each Spinosaur's jaws. The results of the study suggest that while Spinosaurines were derived aquatic specialists, Baryonychines, like Suchomimus, were generalists, with their jaws being able to dispatch both aquatic and land prey, potentially being able to bring down even larger bodied animals, based on the similarities of their jaws with modern crocodiles. While Suchomimus may have preferred a diet of fish, that doesn't mean it was a strict diet, with various instances of preserved Spinosaur meals showcasing that these predators were just like any other, being just as opportunistic as they were good fishermen, feeding on smaller, lighter animals, or at least scavenging from them, from young iguanodonts to large pterosaurs. To make matters even more interesting, Suchomimus was still one of, if not the largest land carnivore in the region at the time, and could have taken on a similar strategy to brown bears, utilizing its large size to muscle in and potentially steal from other smaller predators. Facing down a gigantic T.rex sized carnivore with crocodile jaws and gigantic claws isn't exactly a fair fight, something that Suchomimus would have taken full advantage of. However, while Suchomimus was the largest land carnivore, another predator from beneath the water ruled supreme here. Sarcosuchus, one of the largest crocs to ever live. Distantly related to modern crocodilians, this leviathan could reach lengths of 30 to 40 feet, or 9 to 12 meters, with recent weight estimates clocking it at 4 to 5 tons, large enough to eat any animal it wanted, including dinosaurs. Its powerful jaws, once capable of dragging large dinosaurs to a watery grave. It's this very reason Sarcosuchus is often depicted as a rival to Suchomimus, with both animals sharing the same freshwater territories. Two water-dwelling giants clashing for survival along the river's edge. However, no amount of specializations or frightening features could save Suchomimus from what was yet to come. By 112 million years ago, Suchomimus had vanished from the rivers and marshes of Cretaceous Africa, and it wasn't Sarcosuchus that did them in. Instead, the culprit was more than likely the gradually changing climate, with Suchomimus, along with other baryonychines, going extinct by the mid-Cretaceous. That being said, the story of Suchomimus doesn't end there. In fact, it still continues not only through the science of paleontology, but the imaginations its bizarre fossils capture. Suchomimus is what you might call a dinosaur micro-celebrity, where it frequently appears in dinosaur media, but the general public doesn't quite know its name, often appearing in video games and television, from Dinosaur King to Fossil Fighters to Jurassic World Chaos Theory. What's more, Suchomimus is often treated as a part of Holy Trinity of Spinosaurs, in a manner of speaking. When Suchomimus shows up, it's usually preceded or followed by its more famous cousins, Baryonyx and Spinosaurus, to the point where it isn't a complete set without one or the other, and it's one of the many reasons why dinosaur enthusiasts have fallen in love with this dinosaur. Suchomimus is an extraordinary creature, one like few others, playing a massive role in unraveling the mysteries surrounding the few that do. A croc-mimic that became one of the defining faces of the Spinosaurs.